It scares them. So they tell you, do not go into the forest, because it is death, and we do not want you to change. We want to mold you. Stay here, little one, and be molded. And yet, the lure of the wild never fades, even after they've pulled at the clay of your heart. You who have forests in your eyes and wildness in your veins, who cannot be kept in gilded cages and convention. You are a witch and a wild thing, and you forgot to be afraid when they told you to, and you will never get the song of the wind from your blood. From Kate Kelsey. Episode 1, Season 1, of Memories, Dreams, and Pleasant Decay, in which much is revealed and a story is begun. Part 1, A Memory. The smell of oak and sandalwood hangs in the air, almost masking the musty smell of the ancient tomes housed inside this sanctuary of wood and peeling gold that hides the horrors of the past. I kneel on the red velvet pillow, hands clasped in false prayer, hoping only for the end of the speech before me and the comforting warmth of my bed. I had spent so much of my life there, listening to the empty words of the old man, clothed in black and white, to hide the crimson hate that spilled from his mouth whenever he spoke. Truly, the only thing in this place that made me feel anything was the haunting cacophony of the old ivory organ sitting in the back of those sacred, rotten halls. Even when I heard those dark melodies play, it was no image of a bearded god weeping blood from his hands that made its way across my mind like ink through water, but something older, something made of dirt and broken branches, of winter frost and autumn light. It was not something that sat there and demanded worship. Instead, it ran through the dark woods. It called home, and it called to join in its mirth and marvel with the curiosity and its endlessness. That old oak organ, it sang to me through the dark forest, and it waited for the day I would return the call. Part 2, A Dream. There is an existentialism to the mountains, so cold and ancient, towering in the eggshell blue void, unfeeling, yet containing so much, the secrets and emotions and bodies, and you spiral and break against their jagged rock and burning ice. I lay here in these mountains, crucified to the earth, aware in all my viscera, in a coffin of pine and leaves. The pain comes in waves, like all good pain does, like lapping water, sickly sweet in its aching. A treacle-thick laugh forces its way up my throat, bubbling through blood that clogs the fleshy pipeway. I have been laying here for a while. I can feel the sands of time passing as if they were falling along my spine. I don't think, after all this, I can call myself a person. And that gives me pause. I always knew, I guess, that I wasn't whole. What poetic irony here in the walls of my dreams, built to be a soft cocoon, a place to hide away from the wars, both within and without. Even here I feel pain. Even here the metaphors I construct to abstract away from my own mind, pull and tear and dissect my very being. Electricity begins to flow again through the soft, fatty casing of my brain matter as it crawls its way back into the ruined alabaster of my skull. An eye twitches as the veins rethread themselves. Ever since I was young, I have dreamt of stitching along the jelly like surface of my cornea, pushing the small needle ever downwards towards the tear duct as my starting mark. I was a strange child. My body in this dream is strange, unfamiliar to me, though somehow it feels closer to home than any flesh I've ever inhabited. Even as my entrails slither along the floor, trying desperately to return to the sausage casing of my torso. There is a wild glint in the still working eye. I know who did this, and in this dream, at least, I have the security of knowing I can make them pay. Slowly, on twitching, newly formed and broken and reformed limbs, unsteady as they will be, I stand, reaching out an arm, stretching the fingers. Fire ignites and plays between them, a grin slowly forming on my new face, far too sharp teeth, drawing blood. The clasps of my spine rebuckling, glinting ivory in the decaying sunlight. I pull my arms from the crossite they had made, melted flesh running like egg yolk back into its place. Did they not see the irony of this? Their gods supposedly hung on such an altar. It took me less than 3 days to return. I win, I guess. I am less rotten than him, and yet somehow I have embraced the colonies of fungi, making their eternal home within my cracked ribs. It would take a long, long time for them to die, I thought, as I began to run. Part 3. Pleasent Decay. The journey begins. I watched as people seeped out of the church. The light from the ornate stained glass windows trickled out into the evening, painting the snow a deep red. At least it was aesthetically pleasing, I thought, a nod to the bloodshed in the name of their twisted, burning god. It had been a pretty good day, all things considered. The dark tendrils of fatigue were only nipping at my heels, and the web of pain tracing the nerves of my back was only burning dimly. Buzzing static flows through the fields that stretch out into eternity. The angels make their homes, their solid bodies melting into the wrought iron of radio towers, burning eyes glowing red in the dusk light as my boots crunch on the gravel of the abandoned road leading its winding way towards the cluster of dark pines. More than common weeds are sprouting through the barely trodden earth, and that brings a smile to my cracked face. The path had been too still for far too long. The scars humans had created on the land were barely visible, reaching branches almost touching, barring the passage into the world I once knew so well. I had come here once or twice, when I still thought myself as young, the world awash with bright potential, and what I did not know at the time to be horrors beyond anything. Sometimes I like to imagine the internet as a spanning tracery of veins, stretching along the ghosts of cables that once held it so high. I imagine the way those pumping digital arteries beneath my paper-thin skin, hidden deep within the slowly yellowing fat and burning muscle tissue what would it be like to be without the soft marrow? Maybe the bone would tear the skin if there was so little between them. I hoped I would never get bad enough to find out. A weak laugh sprung to life from the rotting bone of my mouth. Ever the dramatic one I was. That's what being a writer will do to you. I stumbled on my journey, tight leather protecting my ankles from bending too unnaturally, the coarse denim from ruining the thighs I always bragged I could kill with. My diet of Monster and Air certainly wasn't helping my agility. There we go exaggerating again. I eat, I consume, if only as a distraction, to fill the hole that the world has left inside of me. The rain of the previous day had left a soft slickness to the ground, springing forth moss and lichens. Here I remember desperately wanting to hunt through the burrowing undergrowth for fungi and maple leaves. I always wanted to be the kind of child that ran free and explored. I never really was. The fear of change, even in the mildest form of impermanence, kept me chained as much as the preacher's words did. I remember once, as I head onwards down the abandoned path towards the hidden places I had to visit once before I could leave, at least. I remembered being young, almost 5, and as I walked down the wooden stairs towards the basement of the house I have long ago left, barely propped up by the wall beside me, I do not remember what the journey was in search of, but I do remember as I stood there, inky tendrils of the void below, seeming then to be all-consuming as they lapped at my feet. The light switch, which in my infancy I could barely reach anyway, lay close to the bottom of the staircase, consumed by that hungry nothing, and as I edged ever closer, I saw a dead bug laying on the landing. It was not that which truly sent me into a spiral then, but it does go to show how thin that thread has been which holds me onto a healthy mindset. A simple but horrifying thought seeped into my mind, then, with its full force, it registered, like an iceberg lobotomy. That will be me one day, and there is nothing I can do to stop it. I was a very strange child. Now I think I am comfortable with death's warm embrace, like a weighted blanket of earth reserved for me one day. I have corrected my fall, and I am back on the winding pathway. Soon it will come to an end. I drag my feet now. There's a fear in nostalgia, a pain too, a knowledge that whatever we do, the good days are behind us, and if by some impossible miracle they come again, we will be unable to see that until they are gone. Finally, I have arrived. There is a gap in the swaying trees. Winter is beginning to seep into the air, and the trees are green and alive for only a few months a year. They get that luxury. I envy them and their free trial of death, their impossibly deep slumber. The clearing holds a well-kept secret of rotting bored and creeping loneliness. This is where I hid in my early years, though if my teachers and priests were to be believed, there is no hiding from their God. I turn to the passing clouds, drenched in the crimson of evening light. Creepy bastard. I sink to the floor, sitting cross-legged in the abandoned hideaway, the air thick with the scent of mold and the books I left here decaying with the years, just as I had. As much as I had desperately yearned for the wilderness as a child, I had never really been able to actualize my dreams of running through the soft, springy undergrowth, scent of smoke and comfort propelling my journey. I only got out there maybe once a year tops, and even then, for all of my philosophizing on the way here, it was about 3 minutes from the well-worn track and about 10 from my home. In the unnerving, unending suburbia, the kind of place you pass through for but a moment on a road trip, a uniform obliqueness the air thick with cold politeness. The kind of place where everyone is a good Christian, the life of the necrotic parties, until one day in the beige sea of nothing and burning summer, the town priest is found, hung in a house whose walls are the meat of the town's unconfirmed children. Though we never had anything so exciting, our evil kept itself small and darkly poisonous, slithering from their mouths as they spoke, seeping into the ground until the roads began to crack with the oppressive hot mass of the thing. That was how Catholics worked after all. Repression turning the cogs of their souls, building up that horrific self-loathing on which they survived, a combustion engine of pent-up rage. I rose again from the splintered oaken floor, hoisting myself up on the fresh roots which were beginning to make their way through the holes left by rot. This building would be gone long before I ever returned. I had spent so little of my life within its poorly constructed walls. The books I read then, far from high literature. The air clogged, hot and slow with the gorging season, and yet the thought of time's act of destruction brought tears to my eyes, bruised purple-black of night with my lack of sleep. What is it that people like us say? Tomorrow, one day, I'll get better. We mean it desperately every single time, clawing at the idea of false salvation. And yet, even in its cruel irony, the universe continues to make liars of us. Now I think I must drag myself forward, even as the tendrils of exhaustion creep further in the dimming honey-gold light. For if I do not, it will become a dream for tomorrow, and we all know how that ends.